Our next guest is Jeff Benedict, guy who authored The System, The Glory and Scandal of Big-Time College
Love that
Football.
book.
Award-winning author, Sports Illustrated columnist, and friend of the program. Jeff, welcome back. I understand you're enjoying some time at home for a change.
Hey, it's good to be back with you guys. And I am home, and it feels good.
Well, I don't know what you have planned for the weekend, but whatever it is, I hope it involves propping your feet up a little bit. And again, we appreciate you joining us. The NFL draft approaches. You spent a lot of time working with BYU football and Kyle Van Noy and Ziggy Ansah. And as these players get ready for really a life-changing day, what is the mentality of those guys like Ziggy and Kyle as they approach hearing their names called by the NFL commissioner?
You know, it's hard for me to answer what it's like to kind of be in their head in that moment, but I do know this, that the lead up, which is what, the phase Kyle's in right now, where he's spent this off season doing a training regimen that's even more rigorous than he does in college, to get ready for the draft, and all the preparation that goes into the draft it can be pretty overwhelming for a young guy. Even though for 4 years that this is your goal and what you want to get to, and now it's here, and now it's literally right around the corner. And I know Kyle's been working extremely hard, getting stronger, getting faster, and getting conditioned for what comes ahead. I mean, Ziggy, I spent last season with Ziggy in Detroit, and was on the road with the Lions a lot. And I went to training camp with Ziggy last year, and it was really interesting to watch his transition, because it was a phenomenally different experience to be playing in the NFL than to be playing for BYU. And BYU plays a big-time schedule, but when you get into the NFL and suddenly Ziggy is, everyone that you're going against is as big or bigger than you, you're not the biggest guy anymore. And, there's injuries, there's hits that are a lot different than the hits you take in college. And that's really what Kyle's getting ready for now.
Jeff Benedict is on BYU Sports Nation. Jeff, you got to know Kyle pretty well on a personal basis. What about his character lends itself to him being a successful NFL player?
Well, I think, there's physical toughness is obviously essential to make it in the NFL, to be able to stay in the NFL. But the other thing is there's a mental toughness that you need. And there are a lot of players that arrive at training camp who have the mental, that have the physical capacity to play, but they don't have the mental capacity to stay. And that's really the difference. And I think where Kyle's going to have an advantage is that mentally and emotionally he's been tested to a degree that's beyond what the average player going into the NFL has been tested. And he's also shown some things that I think will be very appealing. I know are very appealing because I've talked to some of the scouts, some of the NFL scouts who have been scouting Kyle for 2 years. And one of the things in the file that has a nice asterisk next to it is his character. A lot of people now have read the story that we certainly, really elaborated on in the system, which is that Kyle had not one incident before he got to BYU, but two. And I think it's that second incident that's really more important, because that's the one that Bronco Mendenhall and BYU and, frankly, the rest of the world didn't know about and never would have known about if Kyle hadn't come forward and, got on a plane and flown to Provo on his own dime and owned what he did at the risk of knowing that it could cost him a chance to play football at BYU. And I think when scouts read something like that, they go, this is very unusual. It's very different. It tells you a lot about the kind of person you're drafting. And I'll tell you, that's the kind of thing that also helps teams sleep well at night, because general managers, one of their biggest fears, I remember Jerry Jones, the Cowboys owner, saying that's the thing that he worries about the most. It's not judging their talent. It's judging what might happen off the field after you draft these guys.
Wow,
and I think
okay.
with Kyle, look, anybody's fallible. People make mistakes. But I think with Kyle, that you're getting someone who's honest and who owns up to what he does, who's responsible, and that's a real plus.
Jeff Benedict, Sports Illustrated columnist and award-winning author. joining BYU Sports Nation. Jeff, you followed Kyle when he made his decision to stay at BYU, which quite frankly surprised a lot of people, including myself. And you've just spent a good deal of time with another high-profile athlete that's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Jabari Parker at Duke. How are the two similar or different? Compare and contrast the scenarios there.
That's really interesting that you would ask that, because I've had this conversation with my wife a couple times, because my wife has spent time with Kyle and Jabari, and so we've talked about these two young men and what's different and what's similar. I'll tell you one thing that's similar and I think very interesting about both of these guys is they're both very private, and they're very public figures that are talked about and written about every day. But when you get around them, what you realize is they're actually very private guys who don't really like the limelight and the spotlight. I think they both have an appreciation that it comes with the territory, and there's a certain degree of that you have to do because of the profession they're in. They are, after all, entertainers at the end of the day. But these are two guys that are, I don't want to call them introverts, I wouldn't go that far, but they're very private guys, both of them, and they the kinds of things they like to do with their free time is what I would consider pretty unspectacular. They're very simple things that they like to do with their time. In Jabari's case, he's a film buff, and he'll spend countless hours on a Friday and Saturday night. If they don't have a game, he's often in his dorm room watching movies on Netflix, and people expect to hear something more glamorous about what he's doing in his free time, but that's not the way he is, and Kyle's a lot like that too. The second thing is I think they both have what I would describe as a quiet spirituality, meaning they're not guys who wear their religion on their sleeves. They live it in a quiet way. They go about their business in a very unassuming way. But people who are around them, what you see is that it's kind of what you see is what you get. And I have a lot of affection for that. I think it's great that where they've gone, and Jabari's probably been more places than Kyle at this point, but that's obviously going to change soon. But wherever Jabari's gone, people see him as a kid, as a religious kid who's a quiet kid who just every day, does what he's going to say. It's like President Monson said at General Conference last weekend when he quoted something that Jabari said to Time magazine, which is, "My father taught me to be the same person in the dark that I am in the light."
Yeah.
And I think that to me, that sort of encapsulates what these two guys are about.
Jeff Benedict is on BYU Sports Nation. He's the author of The System, The Glory and Scandal of Big-Time College Football. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. I read it and loved it. I want to ask you about Jabari Parker. There's this feeling out there that the possibility exists, albeit maybe small, that Jabari comes back for his sophomore season at Duke. Do you get the vibe that chance still exists, or what did you learn being around him this season?
All I can say about that is stay tuned.
Okay.
That's it?
Yeah, I can't say anything more about that.
That's fair. That's fair enough. And the reason that this got brought up is because of the way Duke ended the season in a loss to 14 seed Mercer. And so people automatically were kind of like, Jabari's upset about this. He's disappointed with the way things ended at Duke, and he doesn't want to.
He would still be a top 5 pick. Is there any chance he goes on a mission, Jeff?
Let me back up first and just say one of the things is that I notice, and I think I understand why it happens, but it's unfortunate that it happens, is there's a lot of people who write stuff about not just Jabari. They write it about Wiggins. They write it about Randall. This happened with Julius Randle over the weekend where somebody tweeted something about what he's going to do when he hadn't even talked about it with his parents yet. The national championship game wasn't even 10 hours old, and somebody's putting something out there.
Everyone wants to be first.
Everyone wants to be first. And in Jabari's case, it's been much, much worse. And because he is quiet and he doesn't say a lot of things get written about him that are not true. And I don't mean negative, mean things. I'm just saying that there's a lot of stuff that's written that isn't based in fact. And it has nothing to do with reality and sort of what he's doing. And so I'm not in a position right now where I'm comfortable saying anything more than that. I just can't. But, his decision will be known soon enough, and then people will, be able to then see what the facts are on the ground. Because what's being put out there right now is a lot of speculation that comes from who knows where.
Here we are. Jeff Benedict's finally got some time off at his home in Virginia, and we're hitting him with the hard questions. There is no rest for the weary, Jeff.
Well, Jabari's got 16 days to figure it out. He's got to declare by the 27th if he does, in fact, do that.
The thing that, to me that's really, I think, is interesting is if you look back at BYU history, there was a time, if you go back to, let's just say, the early 80s, there was a time when there were a couple of athletes coming out of BYU that were generating attention. It was Danny Ainge, and then it was Jim McMahon, and then it was Steve Young, and it was Ty Detmer. And it's interesting now, to see how things have changed, in my opinion at least. What Lavelle Edwards built or started to build there when he took over in the 70s and then really catapulted in the 80s, you can sort of see the fruits of that now. I mean, this is part of that is because the Mormon Church has grown as much as it has. But first of all, you have BYU producing defensive players that are going to be gems in the NFL, guys like Ziggy and Kyle. Whereas I'm not saying they've never had good defensive players, but obviously this school used to be known as a quarterback factory, and it's changed a bit now. To me, it's better, it's broader. And then you also have some great athletes who aren't going to BYU, who maybe in the past would have been naturals to go to BYU, and today they're playing elsewhere, and they're making a big impact in Major League Baseball and pro basketball and places like that. And I just think it's interesting to see the growth that you could probably, send backwards to when Lavelle started and just go, wow, look how much this has changed and evolved in 30 years.
Great insight from Jeff Benedict, the co-author of The System, the Glory, and Scandal of Big-Time College Football, also an award-winning columnist for Sports Illustrated. Jeff, we thank you for the time. Prop your feet back up. The interview's over. You have survived. And
thanks, guys.
Yeah, if you haven't had a chance to read his book, get out and do it. It's really, really entertaining. Jeff, great to have you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, guys. Take care.